Hey guys, John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo here. Yesterday, January 27th, to the surprise of no one, Apple unleashed their iPad, their much rumored and much typed tablet. While the announcement of a tablet device wasn't so surprising, the specifics of it may have been a little bit shocking to some. Certainly was an aura, I believe, of disappointment a little bit about what the tablet was, so I'm going to give my take on the device itself, what I think about it, where I think it lies in the industry, and really whether I think it's going to be a success. Let's go ahead and get started. This is not going to be a recap video of all the specs. I did that yesterday post-announcement. So first, I think tablet is definitely the way the PC market is trending. We've seen tablet devices be announced from HP, Toshiba, Asus, and now Apple. However, the utility of a tablet device I'm still not convinced about. You're lacking a full physical keyboard with most of them, unless they're a convertible tablet that sort of swirls out. And you lose a lot of the functionality of a standard laptop or even a netbook. So I'm a bit uncertain and unsure as to what the niche market is for the tablet. I initially thought that Apple was going to sort of carve that out with a magazine, ebook, and textbook reader, but they didn't announce that yesterday. I think the most exciting thing about the tablet, and the iPad in particular, isn't what Apple announced, but the potential for the device itself. What they sort of unleashed yesterday is nothing really more than a fat, bigger, or a little more horsepower iPod Touch. It does browsing, and it's got the ebook reader, so we'll talk about it in a minute, but it didn't bring any revolutionary features that people were expecting. And Apple is often a victim of their own successes. Apple has innovated so many times in the past, people expect a revolutionary device every time Steve Jobs takes the stage, and unfortunately that's just not always possible. So you look at the iPads, or the rumors that preceded it: front-facing camera, OLED display, bigger than 9.7 inches. None of that really came to fruition. Do I think that's a bad thing? Not necessarily. Apple certainly can't structure their business model based on rumors and speculation. But what they can structure it on is based on consumer interest, what they think consumers will ultimately purchase. And I'm a bit unsure as to where the iPad slots in, at least as it is now. The platform has a lot of potential. I really like the ebook reader store that Apple announced yesterday. I think certainly that's going to be a big boon to the publishing industry, but also to the iPad. And that's actually one of the big reasons I would consider purchasing the iPad. I currently have a Kindle 2, but I find the e-ink display, while nice on the eyes and non-stressful, to be a bit boring. Oftentimes I wish I had a color display or even a touchscreen. Certainly the iPad slots in very nicely. Books are competitively priced, I believe starting at $4.99 on up, and you'll be able to sort of get access to the new release catalogs that you would expect. I think what's most exciting about the iPad isn't what Apple announced, but the potential for the device really at the hands of developers. That's where the iPod Touch and the iPhone, I think, differentiated itself. Certainly the browser on the iPhone and the iPod Touch is fantastic, but there are a lot of devices out there now with good browsers. You look at WebOS or Android, both of them very capable devices. I think what separates Apple's platforms are the App Store and the developers. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what developers do with the iPad. I think that's when we'll see it start to really differentiate itself. For example, we saw probably a few months back a Sports Illustrated demonstration of what they could do with the iPad. I would have liked to have seen magazines as integrated into the iPad. I think we're going to see that very shortly. A company can very easily set up an app that essentially is a magazine subscription. And that could be a very interesting way to sort of get your digital content. I was very intrigued by the New York Times demonstration as well, sort of having the video play within the browser. Certainly it wasn't Flash-based, probably to most people's chagrins, myself included. And I can't help but think when I look at the iPad, that's going to be great for using it on the toilet. I know people are going to laugh, but it's probably a pretty good device for that too. When you're sitting there, you want to flip through a newspaper or read a magazine. So that really begs the question is, how are you going to input text on the device as well? I don't know how I segued from toilet to text, but that was sort of the way my warped mind works. Well, the iPad has an on-screen keyboard, similar to what the iPhone has. Certainly a 9.7-inch screen is bigger than the 3-odd inch found on the iPhone, but you're still left with sort of no physical buttons to type on. It's got thousands of multi-touch inputs on the screen, so it's supposed to be very responsive, but you can supposedly type using just your fingers, as you would a standard keyboard when it's in landscape mode. I'm a bit skeptical of that. Certainly I think you need to have, at least on a device that size, some sort of physical buttons, and enter Apple's keyboard accessory, clearly sort of showing that their users want a keyboard, but not sort of integrating one into the device. I'm going to give Apple the benefit of the doubt and say the keyboard is going to be usable. With the new sort of keynote and the iWork features that they announced as well, text entry is going to be a big deal. And speaking of iWork and sort of the new suite of applications they announced, and for those of you who don't know what iWork is, it's sort of Apple's version of Office. Here's where I'm a bit uncertain of how this is going to work. If I'm creating a spreadsheet, I'm going to want to save that spreadsheet to a desktop, maybe email it later. Since they didn't announce any sort of file management system, how am I going to save that spreadsheet or save that Word document or save that Excel sheet, whatever the equivalent is in iWork. How are you going to do that? How are you going to open it back up later? Is it going to save something to a cloud? Apple really didn't specify. That sort of made me feel like perhaps what they showed yesterday was an unfinished software. I think that there's a lot more potential that we're going to see from the iPad when it finally is unleashed in about 60 days. But without a file management system, I'm not so sure how useful having a full Office suite of applications are going to be, in this case, iWork. Is anybody really going to make presentations on the fly? I can see it definitely being useful for giving presentations, so I can hand this out to someone that I'm presenting to and turn it over and say, look at this, here's my presentation. I can see the utility in that. But as far as creating and editing on it, not so sure. It does have some very cool features with the photo gallery where you can pinch and zoom your way in. I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. The moral with the iPad being, I'm not sure what the market is. I don't think the market for it has yet been defined. Apple did a fantastic job pricing it. I think sort of starting at $499 price point was well below what most people expected, and that's for the 16 gigabyte non-3G version. Sort of going all the way up to $829 for a 64 gigabyte version with AT&T's 3G. And speaking of 3G, I think what Apple did was evilly brilliant with these new micro SIMs. As soon as the first iPhone was released, locked to AT&T in the US, it was almost immediately, well, a few months later, had to be unlocked. How many other companies out there have micro SIMs or use micro SIMs? Right now, the answer is pretty much zero. So while shipping the device unlocked, and Apple can say we're giving the customer the choice, they're not really giving you any choice. You can't go to T-Mobile, the only other GSM carrier in the US, and pick up a micro SIM, slop it in, and set up a data plan and have it work. There's no option. So Apple's essentially locking the device without locking the device, which is pretty interesting. Certainly, I think we'll see some micro SIMs come out in the future, but for right now, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle with that. I thought that was sort of an interesting model. Also, segmenting it between having 3G and not having 3G I thought was very interesting. It's giving the consumers more choice, which Apple is not necessarily known for. If you're not out very much, you're always near a Wi-Fi connection, no need for 3G, save your money. But if you want that 3G connection, having the option is quite nice, especially for a $29.99 all-you-can-eat plan with no contracts and go month to month. It was really nice. So I'm going out and I know I'm going to need data. I can just go ahead and turn that on and activate it, and then cancel it when I get home and not have to worry about sort of paying the next month's data rates. I think that's something that is quite a nice feature. Overall, I think I will definitely purchase an iPad, just mostly out of curiosity and something to read on the toilet. I think initially we're going to see a big success with the iPad, and I think we'll see things sort of taper down until an expected next version, where all these rumors will start up again. It's going to have a camera, it's going to have OLED, and ultimately never live up to expectations. I think the iPad is definitely a young device. Similar when the iPhone was introduced, it did one or two things very well, but lacked a lot of the features that most people expected. I think ultimately we'll see the iPad get those features, namely a front-facing camera for video conferencing, and perhaps a different or improved text input. But for right now, I think that it's an interesting device, certainly intriguing, and at the very least, it's going to drive the tablet market forward. It's going to force companies to innovate. So whether you hate Apple or hate the iPad, it's kind of hard to ignore that it's going to drive the tablet industry forward and force these other companies, HP, Dell, Asus, and the rest, to innovate. And I think in that aspect, it's very good for the consumer PC industry. So those are my takes sort of on the iPad. Do you agree, disagree? Am I way off base? You're never going to use it on the toilet, maybe just use it in bed. Leave a text or video response. I'm sort of curious to what you guys think about the device. For all your exclusive tech content, be sure to check out Techno Buffalo, where you can create your own subblog and even monetize it, make some money, and interact in our social network. And for exclusive content and giveaways, be sure to check me out at Twitter, twitter.com/John4Lakers. I'm John Rettinger, and I will see you in the next video.